One of the other challenges also that people face, right, apart from convincing investors or convincing whoever, right, even if it's an employee who you want to hire, about where the business is today and what does the status of the business look like today. Also, the constant challenging of forecasting or projecting what the future, right, of the organization, its performance is going to look like. So maybe very quickly touching upon any thoughts from your side that you've seen from different businesses. How should you approach forecasting? How can you give projections, right, which are realistic, which affect the true state of what the company can do, but at the same time also keeping in mind that taking, say, goals which are ambitious, which motivate people, which drive the organization forward, right? It's a balance that
Yeah,
has to effectively be maintained. So
yeah.
any thoughts on how to be good at forecasting as operating teams, as founders in companies?
Very, very tough question. I think the simple answer to that is cautious optimism. So I have never built a forecast that has worked out. So and so 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 I think the beauty of the kind of businesses, especially in early stages, right? Not so much in the growth stage. I think you have to have more visibility, but at least in early stages, I think the fun thing is that like you learn along the way, right? So it's very, very difficult to get forecasts right. I think what is important is why we do forecasting in spite of knowing that forecasting is not going to stand, because we will have
Right.
learnings along the way. Business models will change, we will improve or become worse, or markets will teach us a lot. I think is just at least the way we are doing business today, we know what we are going towards. And then whenever those changes happen, right, you have to be agile enough to rework your forecasts, etc. So the important thing is that you know what are the key assumptions that could change and the things that should not change, right?
Right.
Understanding these two things very, very clearly, because you're not going to get your forecast right. Let's face it, right? So let us not even try to say that, okay, if you do these five things, you'll get your forecast right, because it doesn't exist that way. But what you can figure out when you're doing your forecast is what are the things that will remain static, which will not change, which are the assumptions which should ideally not change. Because if those assumptions change, then the business itself is in question, right? Then
Right.
you think about whether you should continue in that business or not. And then there could be a set of assumptions that could change over a period of time, or that you could learn over a period of time. Having clarity on those, and then building your forecast to the best of your knowledge and information as of today, with what you believe those assumptions could be, but measuring your performance as you go along your assumptions and comparing that, okay, this is what I assumed. So what you're measuring when you're doing your MIS analysis is not that I had targeted at 50 crore revenue, I went it up at 35 crore revenue. Why did that 15 crore go wrong, and just coming up with some explanation for that. But to say that, okay, where did my assumptions go wrong? I had assumed this, my assumption went wrong over there. And then figure out whether that difference in assumption where you went wrong was because of something that is driven externally or internally, that you can correct
Right.
or not correct. And if it is driven externally, then you actually readjust your forecasts to correct for that. And if it is something internal, then you figure out how do you strengthen yourself internally to actually achieve the assumption that you're set out to achieve. So I think that level of understanding of the business plan as to what are the key drivers of the business plan, or what are the key assumptions of the business plan, having clarity on that is what you can actually, is what is in your control. Let's put it that way. Outcomes are not really in your control because you don't know enough. But then if
Right.
you have clarity, as you know, you will be able to manage your forecasts in a way that you can be agile and you can actually keep getting better at it. So that is so that when you get to a growth stage, when you get to, let's say, from series B to C to D, that time your ability to forecast is better because you know where you make mistakes. So your margin of errors will keep coming down. And that is how you have to look at it. It is a act of getting better with your learnings from your mistakes, rather than doing five things right on day one.
Got it. Got it. No, I think that's a very, very helpful way to think about it. It brings us back to what you said earlier, about the the design of the business and the things that are within your control. And very, very importantly, like the core assumptions, right? Like we may not get the outcome number right, in terms of what we were able to predict, but do the core assumptions that we made about the business, do they hold true? And if not, then what corrective action internally, externally need to be taken? I think that's a fantastic way of actually thinking about how or why the exercise of forecasting, even if you know that the numbers will never always be exactly what you had thought them to be, why that's relevant. And maybe that brings us right to the last question from my side for the session, which is all of this that we've discussed, right? Having like a good understanding of what role finance plays in ops, to the functional aspects of how you build a finance function, how you manage to do your cash flow and financial planning, to then ultimately how you need to think about business design, how you need to think about, say, forecasting and business assumptions, etc., brings us to the core aspect of fundraising, right? So a little bit of an open-ended question for you, which is, what does a good fundraising process look like, right? Like for a company to get to the outcomes that they wanted from that process as fast as possible, for the people who have to invest or lend to that company, for them to be able to build comfort and be able to conclude their processes as fast as possible. Any thoughts on what companies, on founders can do well from a fundraising?
Let me flip the question, Rohit. Let me say what pisses us off, right? Or like what you do wrong, or what can people do wrong? I think that may be a different way of looking at it. I think what I have seen a lot of companies and businesses do is there's a strong difference. And let me give you a live example. Right? You talk to a founder, okay, what is your business model? Oh, my business model is this, it's digital, it's like this is how we get customers, this is what we do. Okay, great. Sounds very, very interesting. What is your scale today? Oh, I've got to a scale of like 5 crore per month sales. You said, oh wow, like that's quite fascinating. With this business model, you've got to a 5 crore sales per month is very, very interesting. And then you double click and you see what the breakup of that 5 crore sales is, and you realize that the 50 to 10% of that sales is actually coming from the business model which the founder spoke about, and the rest of the 80 to 90% of the revenue is actually like revenue from very boring or very like not very innovative sources and just building revenue for the sake of building revenue. And I think that is what has I have seen very, very often, where the business model that is being talked about is not aligned with the PNL or is not the full true story, right? Now, if the founder in the first meeting itself had told, rather than me discovering this, if the founder in the first meeting itself had told that, you know what, this is the business model I'm trying to build. In this part of the business model, I've got to a revenue of, let's say, 50 lakhs a month or 1 crore a month. But I have, uh, but then I have to, for this reasons or for finding myself in the market or for establishing myself in the market, I'm also doing business the traditional way. And there the revenue is 4 crores a month, and over a period of time, the ratio from 20/80 will change to 80/20. And this is what my plan to it is. Then it makes a far more interesting conversation with the same set of numbers without actually, I'm not saying do something differently, but how the narrative can change. Like be honest in realizing your own position. So one thing I always tell founders is that before you lie to others, you lie to yourself, right? And that is where you go wrong. Or, you know what? I am gross margin positive. Gross margin can mean everything from anything to anything. And I trade at a 12% gross margin, whereas you have not taken wastage or you have not taken like logistics as a cost. I think don't lie to yourself and don't lie to others. I think that becomes very important. The common excuse I've heard over here is, oh, everyone is doing it this way, so I'm also doing it this way. Right? Everyone is doing it this. Like everyone's business, when everyone else's business dies, your business is not going to die along with them. So like I think that is one thing that is very, very important, that we know what your numbers are, right? And represent them correctly and find the right narrative around that, right? It's not a game where you have to uh, just somehow or the other convince someone to accept your story. uh, I think that is something that I've found. Sorry, I'm just being very, very uh, rather than giving overall like picture, I'm just being very, very specific as to what are the kind of things from a finance perspective that kind of
Sure.
goes wrong. The other thing is that like the picture that you presented at the time of the pitch, and once you look at the first set of data, that itself being there's being dissonance in that, right? That also becomes a little bit of a challenge. And obviously for a smooth fundraise, if your quality of data is good, investors also get a lot of confidence that whatever data you ask for, you get it quickly, it's in good shape, it's in good quality, you are able to make sense out of it fast. I think apart from making the diligence process faster, it also gives a lot of confidence to the investor. So coming back to the first point that I said, right, the boring part of the business, which is just the basic data capture, timely data. Like let's say I'm diligencing a company, let's say May, and if a founder gives me, if the founder is unable to give me March data, then it's a red flag for me, right? So you're in May, you don't even have March data, something is seriously wrong with this business. Now, if the company is able to give me March data, but not an April data, I'm saying, yeah, this is acceptable, right? I'll be happy, I'll start diligencing that business. If that company is able to give me April data, I'm like, wow, right? This company really has its shit to, like, has put its act together. So that is how it will like kind of plays out, right? And as an investor, you form a first impressions judgment about a team, its capabilities, its discipline. Because at the end of the day, every business has to be disciplined. Like cowboy businesses don't run long. That's been totally proven. So
Got
yeah,
it.
that's what I would say. Be true to yourself before pitching to others.